I am the Space Quest Historian. The Seventh Guest is a game that has popped up more than a few times on this channel. I did a fairly lengthy video on the original from 1993 and its ill-fated sequel, The 11th Hour from 1995, which was part wide-eyed nostalgia and reverent appreciation of its historical importance, part derisive cynicism towards its cornball acting and thoroughly disconnected gameplay. In the comments of that video, a few people asked me if I'd played the VR remake that came out 3 years ago, and I hadn't, primarily because I don't own a VR headset, but also because, let's face it, most VR games are utter shit. But the Seventh Guest VR was seemingly the outlier in a vast sea of headache-inducing mediocrity. It was a game that not only utilized the medium of VR to its fullest with its well-crafted puzzle design, but also reimagined the story of the original game with what critics almost universally applauded as surprisingly good. So yeah, I was a little bummed out that I didn't get to experience the Seventh Guest when it came out, but I wasn't about to go out and spend an ungodly amount of money on a Mark Zuckerberg-approved piece of headgear for the price of my soul, my dignity, and whatever else that fetid glob of alien spooge on legs uses to train its algorithms with, just for the privilege of playing what sounded like the one decent game in a sea of novelty trash. But now, I don't have to, because Vertigo Games, the developers of the VR remake, have kindly retooled their VR-only game into a regular mouse and keyboard affair, and this means I can finally take a look at it and see how it plays, which is what I did on stream over the course of a few evenings. Now, one criticism I'll levy right off the bat. This game doesn't allow you to manually save your game. Instead, it overrides a single manual save throughout the entire course of the game, so there was no way for me to leave bookmarks along the way to go back so I could capture clean footage. Nor does it give you an open house mode at the end of the game, which was the original game's reward for completing it. The open house mode was basically a magic save file where all the rooms were open from the start and you can go back and play all the puzzles as many times as you wanted, if you for some reason wanted to. The remake, however, gives you the middle finger instead and petulantly demands that you replay the whole game from the beginning, which I'm not fucking doing, Vertigo Games. You can fuck right off with that bullshit. So instead, we're going to be trying out a new video format here, where in lieu of my regular stream of consciousness style video, we're going to go through this like a diary, or an audio log, if you will, for you survival horror fans, using footage from my live streams of the game and interspersed with genuine reactions and commentary as it happened when I was playing it. All this to say that this is why you're going to be seeing a face cam and a chat box throughout this video. Again, please address all complaints you may have about this to Vertigo Games. Right, let's get on with it. My first session consisted largely of getting used to the mechanics and getting very frustrated by them. I'll explain in a bit, but first, let's talk about initial impressions. The presentation is fantastic, yes, and the whole thing about the guests being live action shot in volumetric video, meaning you can walk all the way around them as they're acting out their scene, is pretty fucking wowza. But the acting is not as endearing as the reviews I've read made them out to be. The actors feel very stiff and uncomfortable, and generally not at all sure of what they're actually supposed to be doing. The worst acting crime here is Hamilton Temple. Gone is the cake-twirling madman of the original. Instead, what we're left with here is this weird Sacha Baron Cohen lookalike who seems like he's doing a shitty impersonation of David Blaine, reciting his lines with all the captivating splendor of wondering out loud where he put his car keys. The rest of the cast just seems sort of comatose. I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't expecting the absurdly histrionic acting of the original, but it feels like these actors went way too far in the other direction, trading in the arm-waving, scenery-chewing community theater on drugs vibe from the original for, I don't know. The best comparison that comes to mind is theme park mascot actors. Like, there's almost nothing there. The line readings are flat and emotionless. Julia Heine here throws some good shade with the eye roll, and Martine Burton's actor really leans into the classic femme fatale shtick, but other than that, the acting is just flat.
These bookcases were moving by themselves.
Who are you talking to?
A skeleton came alive right before my very eyes.
I saw blood. Well, I was
Hooray.
in my room getting my beauty rest. Perhaps you should do the same.
Fuck
All I
off.
saw was a dusty bedroom in need of a cleaning service.
Also, Henry Stoff is British now for some reason, and he looks like my granddad.
I believe everybody deserves a second chance.
Now, my granddad was a handsome man, but he looked about as threatening and mischievous as a shaggy dog taking a nap, and this fucking guy sure as shit isn't Henry Stoff. Even when he's addressing the guests directly through vinyl records and music boxes. Okay. He seems not so much like a conniving genius madman, and more like he's narrating an instruction manual for an air fryer.
Tonight promises to be a night full of surprises. My puzzles, and perhaps you'll walk out of here with your heart's most secret desire.
The CG apparition of him coming out of the painting in Dutton's room was pretty cool, though, I have to say. Oh, hi. The first few puzzles seem well designed and fair, even to someone like me who hates logic puzzles. This one in the dining room riffs on the original cake puzzle by having you clear the board by picking 4 tiles at a time. Bird, boy, donkey, fish. This is almost the cake puzzle. I see what it's doing. You're supposed to...
2 skulls and 2 stones. The rest is just icing.
Bird, fish, donkey, boy. Have I just screwed myself? No. Boy, fish, bird, more bird. Uh-oh. Oh. Spaghetti-o. But before it'll even let you do that, you have to go and do this little mini puzzle to get the dinner plates, which you then need to stick into this contraption to get the piece you need to activate the main puzzle. Later in the Noxus room, you have to solve this satisfying train puzzle, which is another riff on a previous puzzle, this time from the 11th hour, and this much less satisfying comptometer puzzle, also a riff on a puzzle from the 11th hour that I totally skipped because, math. Anyway, these provide you with cubes that you then slot into this main puzzle with the rising and falling steps. And this is a refreshing idea. These little mini puzzles feel like sort of a little aperitif before the main course, and it makes the puzzle seem interconnected with the environment, not to mention with each other. One puzzle ties into another, that sort of thing. Now, what sucks about these puzzles, though, is the interface. This is where it becomes painfully obvious that this was a VR game first, and the transition to a mouse and keyboard interface is far from ideal. First of all, why the fuck is the keyboard even in this equation in the first place? The mouse is all you really should need. Why do I need to use WASD to move this handle around? Why do I need to use Q and E to rotate these little wheels? And worst of all, why do I need to once again use WASD to select and move these coffins? I wish I could have like an on-screen cursor to just drag this shit around instead of having to use the keyboard, essentially. Having to try these things out and just move these things here and there and forward and backwards. Yeah, fine. That would be fine. But having to deal with this really infuriating way of selecting them is just sapping all the fun of experimentation out of it. It's kind of like, you know, in the original games where you had to sit through the animation. If your computer was really slow, you had to wait a long time for the unskippable animation of, you know, the fucking cake piece to come off the cake and stuff like that. This kind of feels the same way. It feels like something unnecessarily annoying is blocking me from having any fun with this. This could all have been accomplished with the mouse, and the coffin slider thing is especially infuriating because successfully selecting the coffin you want to slide is pretty much a total crapshoot, and you end up spending more time cursing at the stupid interface than actually solving the puzzle. I mean, come on, Vertigo. I know you guys are working backwards from a floaty hand VR control scheme thing, but I think you dialed in the time machine just a smidge too far here. Fuck these keyboard controls. I'm fine with using WASD for moving around, but for the rest of it, just let me use the fucking mouse. This is some lazy ass shit here, Vertigo. On the second day, I decided that the comptometer puzzle can get fucked.
Get fucked!
So I decided to skip it. Like its predecessors, this remake has an in-game hint system that will progressively nudge you in the right direction until it flat out lets you bypass the puzzle. Except this one doesn't work as simply visiting a library book or asking a telepathic PDA. No, you gotta pay for it. Scattered around the mansion are these little Stoff coins which can be exchanged in the hint system for the privilege of skipping a puzzle. The hints on how to actually solve the puzzles, they're free. It's just the skip puzzle part that you need to pay for. I guess they did this to discourage players from just skipping every puzzle in the game, but these coins are so overabundant, there really doesn't seem to be any practical point to this. I'm pretty sure that by the end I had more coins than there were puzzles in the game. After solving all the puzzles in a room, the room sort of reverts back to its pristine pre-abandoned state, which makes no sense when you think about it, but it's a nice visual indicator that you're now done with a particular section of the game, and you're treated to more masterclass acting.
See? The blood!
There's nothing there. Eleanor! Eleanor! There's nothing.
Yeah.
We have to win.
Do I have to slap you again?
Do you want to see me locked up?
Yes.
By our creditors? Do you? Now, shape up, Eleanor. No more of your spells. Not today.
I just need a moment.
He sort of lagged out of existence there. Alright, time for some hat magic in Hamilton Temple's room. I remember seeing this part in a preview video of the VR version and thinking, wow, that's really clever. There is just no way you could do this outside of VR. And truthfully, this puzzle does feel very dumbed down in comparison to what I remember seeing in that preview. The mechanics of the hat portal here is so fucking clever, but they really had to restrict you from doing anything spectacular with it. You can't put this receiver hat down anywhere you want. It has to go in one of these blue fuck me lights. And obviously you don't get the satisfaction of actually reaching through the hat to fiddle with whatever's on the other side. Still, the biggest problem with this puzzle isn't so much figuring out what you need to do, it's figuring out how the game wants you to do it. Once you get the suitcase open and realize you can shrink the hat down, it becomes a little more obvious, but it still took me an embarrassingly long time.
This looks like a job for the incredible shrinking hat.
Well, he just delivered that line with no pizzazz whatsoever. But okay, I get it. I can now put the hat here. I don't see why I couldn't just put the big hat sideways onto the books here and still reach through, but fine. This is... am I not supposed to inspect this thing? Yes, I am. And now I can have this for reasons. It's just a coin. Oh, of course. I don't know what I was thinking, but I put it here. At last, we're getting somewhere. Also, I'm pretty sure I tried flashlighting this Ghostly Cup game about 1,000,000 times before I saw the barely noticeable indicator of which cup I was supposed to pick, but yeah, alright. So do I just get a hammer or something and just smack the shit out of it? Is that what you're telling me? Looks like a different one gets lit when you... But I think that's just a reflection. I think that's just a reflection. No, I guess it wasn't. Truthfully, this just looks like it had a cyan tint to it, but to me, it just looked like yeah.
That's some bullshit.
After the room is all done and dusted, the actor playing Temple tries to react to a skeleton playing peekaboo in his closet, itself a cute little nod to the closing song of the original, Skeletons in My Closet, with predictably lethargic results.
Okay, Mr. Stauf. I know you're here somewhere. I know you can hear me.
Well, you said you wanted camp. What up, bro? You said you wanted camp, you got camp. What the fuck was that? I should probably talk a bit about this flashlight we're carrying around. It's called the Spirit Lantern, and it's sort of the game's primary WoW mechanic. You're able to shine it on the environment and see the mansion as it looked like in its unbesmirched heyday, as well as uncover macabre little secrets hidden in the paintings, which is cute, but not really useful beyond being a cool little technological flex for the developers. It does have some use, though, which is that you frequently need it to highlight hidden scribblings left behind by, I guess, the ghost children or something? Spoiler, I guess, but I'm assuming most of you know how the story goes. There's a lot of dead children in this game. Fun for the whole family. Anyway, there's no actual point to having these little hints hidden behind the Spirit Lantern other than, again, the developers flexing on us, and it makes even less sense in the context of the story itself because this implies that the children were in fact alive at some point and running around the mansion leaving cryptic clues to each other on how to solve the puzzles, which we know is not what happened because their souls were swallowed by the dolls long before they ever came to Stauf's mansion. Or maybe it's supposed to be Tad's ghost leaving clues to himself back when he was roaming the mansion when he was still alive, but that doesn't make any fucking sense either because, another spoiler I guess, we're playing as the ghost of Tad trapped in a time loop, which begs the question, why are we solving these puzzles again if we already know how to solve them? Is the true hell of Stoff's mansion that he's forced to play these fucking puzzles over and over again every time the mansion resets? Come to think of it, does the mansion even reset in this version of the story? I'm not entirely clear on how this works because the big reveal at the end about how we are the ghost of Tad isn't so much a big reveal in this game as it is a casual side note, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I know what we're all here for. Fucking soup's on.
Now it's a proper brew.
Let's fucking go.
Boy, thanks.
Shut the fuck.
Stauf, what do you want? Show yourself.
Hello! Hello! If you please. I'm okay with that. You know, I gotta hand it to the actress playing Julia Heine. It's no Oscar-winning performance by any stretch, but compared to some of the other dimwits in the cast, she is a breath of fresh air. This scene at the bottom of the grand staircase with Edward Knox ends in the most baffling way.
I'll await your answer in my room after the library rendezvous, where it's nice and private.
Line. What the fuck? Why did she do that? Why did she do that? At no other point in any of the FMVs does a character do something ghostly like that. The original was full of these what the fuck is going on here kind of moments, most famously Dutton's suitcase full of gloopy money. Yeah, alongside Julia H. regressing in her mirror, Hamilton conjuring up a skeleton hooker, and Martine turning into a balloon animal in the crypt, but this remake forgoes all of those what the fuck moments in favor of some good old-fashioned storytelling, except for this one weird fucking moment. What the fuck? What is that supposed to be? I mean, it's not even a special effect or anything. The actress just went, maybe she just really needs to see a chiropractor. I don't know. Okay, side note, but I have to address this. Every time the story advances and new rooms unlock, a vinyl record appears out of thin air containing an audio message from Stoff telling the guests absolutely nothing of any particular value. My question is this though, when did Stoff find the time to record and press these records? Because I'm assuming they're Shellac records since this game takes place in 1928 and the vinyl records we know today didn't become standard until the 1940s. And as far as I know, you can't simply cut your own Shellac records at home on a lathe cutter no matter how fucking rich you are, because the material is simply too brittle. So for this to work, Stoff would have had to record these little monologues somehow, then send them off to be stamped and manufactured professionally at a record pressing plant, which is a lot of fucking effort to go through to simply avoid talking to your fucking guests in person. Also, the fucking record isn't spinning fast enough to be a 78 RPM Shellac record. Come on, guys. Never put vinyl records in a game unless you know exactly what you're doing, because vinyl nerds are some pedantic fucking twats. And I should know. Anyway, some of these puzzles are really good. This one where you have to program this little knight up to meet his princess by using these little pins on the dashboard down in front was satisfying. It's not too hard, but it's just difficult enough to give you a little rush of feel good once you solve it. Wait, where am I? I'm there. And then go once more to the left. The fuck?
I did it!
Well, no you didn't! I did, you little shit! Fuck you, Tad. No one likes you. In fact, a lot of these puzzles tread that fine line between simple and rewarding. You might even call them a bit on the easy side, which is why I ended up overthinking a lot of them. I would say 5 would be the long line. Let's go 2,
What do those markings
3.
keys mean?
Shut up, Ted. I'm trying to work it out. And then 4 would be half of. I don't fucking know. How about you fuck off, Ted? We are in the late stages of the game now, so they're trying to throw their most fiendish contraptions at us, but they never really get overwhelming. At worst, they're just a bit tedious. Case in point, this seating arrangement puzzle can go fuck itself, and the developers must have realized this at one point because it's one of those puzzles where the protagonist just instinctively knows when it's solved correctly, which means you can just chop off these dull heads and spam click them on decapitated bodies until Tad goes, yeah, that seems about right.
There we go.
What?
All in the right place.
Oh, I salted.
So detailed. So full of...
I was stretching. There are, of course, these hints on the walls that you can reveal with your magic flashlight of nonsense, but whoever designed this puzzle decided to go out of their way to make them as tedious as possible to decipher because you have to follow these squiggly lines all around the wall to figure out who goes next to who. There is no reason for this other than to waste the player's time, so...
Get fucked!
In fact, what I'm having the most trouble with at this stage is the hidden object portions of the game, which are just maddening. Most of the rooms require you to seek out a missing piece of the puzzle, sometimes several of them, before you're allowed to actually start the puzzle, and they don't make this easy. The rooms are richly detailed, and since this was originally a VR game, you can pick up and toss around nearly every object in the game for no reason. Every VR game does this, and I'm not sure why. I'm sure it's an attempt to make the virtual world more realistic, but it has the unfortunate side effect of making these little treasure hunts really, really annoying. Staff's workshop in the basement is especially egregious in this regard. You have to find a bunch of tiles for this swan picture puzzle and a bunch of these dildos to go on this thingamajig puzzle, and no one can provide a satisfying explanation of why they're scattered all over this place. Back upstairs, oh, sorry ladies.
The things I've seen. You and your little lackey.
Oh, I forgot Heine's actress is also really good.
Sober as an ice cream soda on New Year's Eve. What are you hiding?
I said move.
Oh no. A little... Never bring a knife to a gunfight.
Old hag.
Shoot her! Oh god, right in the womb as well. Don't kill the only other good actress. Anyway, I don't know how long I spent running around this fucking bathroom looking for something to plug these holes in the walls with, only to eventually realize on a complete lark that I could just yank the plug out of the bathtub. But once I got that sorted, actually moving this little cockroach around the maze on the wall and plucking up these holes to keep the spiders from eating him was, again, pretty satisfying, although a little stress-inducing because you can't just take your time with it. There are some timer elements to this, and especially these big spiders on the mirror seem to operate on a delayed timer that doesn't make much sense when you're looking at what's going on screen, but you know, I solved it.
Yes, all of them are trapped.
Further towards the kill zone, please. Yes. I'm so glad we did that. Haha, we have accomplished animal cruelty. Our reward is to watch Hamilton sleepwalk in on Tad sitting in the bathtub. He then gets shot by Julia. Good fucking riddance. Off you go, Tad. It's time to meet your doom. Oh good, more hidden object bullshit. Now we have to find these little figurines of the guests and place them in the room of the house where they died, and we don't even get a proper reward for it because we already saw Hamilton kill Edward up here earlier in the game. Oh, that was the weakest elbow I've ever seen in my life. What? Are you coming, Hamilton? Or are you just breathing hard? Yeah, what the fuck was that weak sauce elbow? I swear, this actor is so sleepy, it's amazing they got him to stand upright long enough to get through a scene. Wake up! Anyway, let's skip ahead a bit and get to the finale, because this is where things get a bit interesting. Try to ignore the frankly alarming dip in frame rate when I look at this door over here. If I look over here, we're sort of good. But... oh god, there's something behind this door that we are not supposed to look at. And let's instead see what this game does to attempt to retcon one of the most baffling aspects of the original. In this game, Tad didn't just randomly break into the mansion. No, this time we're taking a turn for the really creepy. And I don't mean like, ooh, spooky kind of creepy. I mean like Neverland Ranch allegations kind of creepy. Let's step into Stoff's bedroom. Yes, this is his bedroom. And see what we can see. Oh, good, there's a child in here.
Let us in, Tad.
Shit, dude.
You're the key. Open our realm. Open our realm.
Well, if you put it like that. Now, up until this point, we've been drip-fed the story of Stoff through these little storybook pages scattered around the house, and it mostly mirrors the story in the original. He was a drifter, moving from town to town, and then he starts hearing voices who tells him to build toys so he can harvest the souls of children. We'll get back to that part in a bit, but there's one key difference in Stoff's backstory here compared to the original, and that's why he became the way he is. And the short of it is, he was poor, so people bullied him. That's the reason. And that supposedly explains why Stoff invited these 6 dumbasses specifically. It's because they were, at some point in the past, people who had bullied them when he was a starving child on the streets. I mean, I'll give Stoff this. He sure knows how to hold a fucking grudge. I mean, I get it, but honestly, if you're gonna go down that route, at least give me something more than just Edward refused to give me a bank loan and Dutton once turned his nose up at me, the sniveling little cunt. Maybe I'm jaded, but it just seems kind of petty to me. Then again, maybe the voices were like, yeah, that's good enough for us. Go kill some children. Let's go build a scary mansion. Chop chop. Which reminds me, again, quick side note, why does Stoff have an English accent in this game?
I hope you like my little party.
He's not English, he's American. Also, I repeat, he's not scary in the slightest. At best, he's a bit irritating. He looks like he should be pushing a simmer frame around and complaining that his oatmeal was too hot. But getting back to young Tad here, I've gone back and watched this numerous times thinking I must have missed something, but no. Apparently the new improved lore of how Tad ended up in the mansion is that Stoff invited him and he went.
Why don't you have a seat right over there for me, please?
Fucking what? And then he died? Got turned into a doll? Because we do get to put together a Tad doll with a broken face here, but doesn't that just mean the voices got their wish then? Why are we still doing all this then? Because in the end, Julia delivers Tad to Stoff, and instead of getting vomited to death like she does in the original, Stoff does the age regression thing to her that was just a little throwaway spooky shit scene in the original, but I do love this little piss-off hand waves the actor does here. And after lecturing a 10-year-old boy on business ethics, seriously, what? We're whisked away to the final puzzle of the game, a puzzle that harkens back to the good old days of playing against Stoff, or rather the computer. Thankfully, it's not the microscope puzzle again, nor is it any of these sadistically obtuse versus games of the 11th hour. No, it's actually, dare I say it, fun. It's fun. This game is fun. Not as a final puzzle in a game about dead children, no. It's a board game, and like most board games, the chances of you winning are more or less random. But as strictly a board game, it's great fun. I wish the lads at Vertigo would make an online multiplayer version of this game, because I would absolutely love to lean back with the homies on my SQH Discord and just play this into the wee hours. Stoff devilishly sneers that he won't tell you the rules of the game, but fuck you, they're not that hard to figure out. Halfway through the first round, you will have figured out that it's essentially a game of Ludo, with a few twists. You've got these 4 souls on the left-hand side that need to make it to one of the portals in the center and be saved, and Stoff has the other 4. Whoever gets all their 4 souls into the center first, wins.
You did it. I remember everything. Now there's only one thing left to do.
Shut up? Because I'm hoping for shut up. The twists involve these symbols you can stand on. Blue protects your soul so it can't get captured, while green gives you another go, and every once in a while a demonic fart tornado will appear from the center and work its way outward. So, yeah, this is fun. Except it doesn't make a lick of fucking sense in the context of the story. Why would the voices, or Stoff, or whoever built this game, rig it up so that Stoff has an equal chance of losing? Because if they want Tad's soul this bad, why go through all this bullshit? And of course, I have to break this up again. What exactly is everyone supposed to get out of this? The voices keep moaning for Tad to open the portal, but no one seems to have any clear idea of what will actually happen if they do. Also, Tad is already dead. Haven't they already gotten what they want? Why isn't the portal open already? Why is Tad still floating around the fucking house solving puzzles over and over again? Why do these fucking little butterflies keep whispering at me? Shut the fuck up. I mean, the original was also aggravatingly unwilling to provide any details about what the stakes actually were, in fact more so, because at least in this remake there's a brief mention of a portal that the voices want to go through. Nothing of the sort is even so much as hinted at in the original. In fact, the voices aren't even mentioned in the original. But again, why everyone is stuck in a time loop solving these stupid puzzles over and over again, and why solving this board game somehow breaks the spell and lets all the children's soul fly out the window is a question that shall remain unanswered. And that's honestly my main gripe with this game. They had every opportunity to flesh out the story of the original. They were going to rebuild it from the ground up. They had the technology, they had the puzzles, they had new actors, new script writers, and they had every opportunity, but they actually chose to stick too close to the original. Not everything has to be laid out and explained in detail until there's not a shred of mystery left. I mean, The Shining wouldn't be one of the greatest horror movies of all time if this final shot of the photo on the wall didn't leave us with more questions than answers, but this game and its predecessors is not The Shining. The story of the seventh guest in both its incarnations seems to think that being bafflingly vague is the same as being tantalizingly enigmatic, and it's not. If you're going to keep simple, vital details from us that explain why we should give a shit, then your story has no stakes, no drive, no reason to engage us. Now, the original got away with this because it was so new and dazzling for its time that people didn't seem to mind that the story made no fucking sense. But times have changed, and Vertigo, again, had every fucking opportunity to expand on the story and the lore, but no. The story can still just be boiled down to, mad old toy maker makes a deal with the devil, or in this case the voices in his head, to steal the souls of children through his dolls, and then invite 6 posh cunts and an easily startled child and pit them against each other with a series of mildly befuddling carnival games in order to accomplish fucking nothing, apparently. All this, but with shit acting.
I should lie down.
Allow me to escort you upstairs. I will be in the game room.
Oh, fuck off. But it's not all bad. I mean, the game itself is enjoyable to play. The puzzles are really well thought out, I think, and for the most part actually fun to solve, in stark contrast to the somewhat bare-bones design of the original and the borderline psychotically mean-spirited design of its sequel. Everything on the gameplay side of things felt really well crafted, with the exception of the fucking keyboard UI, but maybe that's something they'll fix in the future versions of this game. It also looks and sounds fantastic. I mean, sure, the volumetric FMV is a bit jank, but you gotta admit it looks impressive, even as it occasionally veers out of sync with the audio and jagged edges of people's faces start sputtering off in random directions like tiny little fleshy solar flares. If you're gonna do an FMV game for the modern era, this was the way to do it, no questions asked. The technology is only gonna get better, and I can't wait to see what people do with this shit in the future. The music, I gotta mention the music, is also a particular standout. Jonathan van der Wijngaarden took bits and pieces of the original score and molded it into this really evocative soundtrack that sounds equal parts cozy and eerie. He could have very easily gone the lazy route and just re-recorded the original tunes in some sort of new style, like some dweebs have already done, but he went the extra mile and the game is better for it. Also, what a fucking flex to get Frank Klepacki to play the drums on this. Yes, that's Frank Klepacki.
I beg your pardon?
Klepacki. Yeah, it's not an easy last name to say. Anyway, I did an interview with Jonathan over on those aforementioned dweebs YouTube channel. There's a link in the description.
Let's just do it in a Dutch way, which is van der Wijngaarden.
Van der Wijngaarden. There you go. You gotta get the throat in there.
Yeah.
Also, I just have to flex my vinyl copy here. Ooh, look at that signature. Hey. Anyway, on the whole, it's not a disappointing game. It's a fairly competent, decent remake that looks and sounds amazing, but unfortunately falls short in the daring to take any fucking risks department. It sticks too close to the original story with all of its myriad of flaws, plot holes, and head-scratching obtuseness when they had ample opportunity to flesh out the narrative and really sell the story for a modern audience. I said this in my video on the original games. There is a fantastic horror story buried in the seventh guest somewhere underneath all the camp and dreadful acting. It just needs someone to go in and dig it out and let it breathe, and sadly, Vertigo just weren't up to that task. Oh, and it bears mentioning the actors were shit. I believe I have mentioned that once or twice before. The actors are really, really shit. Martine and Julie are off the hook. Maybe Dutton if I'm being charitable. The rest can just fuck off back to acting school or waiting tables. I mean, maybe the FMV director was just shit. I can't tell. It wouldn't be the first time that's happened with the seventh guest project, but fucking deliver me from discount David Blaine here. Jesus fucking Christ. Anyway, bye, Chrome stream and all that. Fuck off. Kalaki.